A lot of people are about acceptance. They want to be accepted, which is great. But in a lot of areas in life, acceptance can simply mean tolerance. And it doesn't really drive you to improve or treat someone better or something like that. You just tolerate it. So if you just accept your fate, it may not drive you to get better. It may not drive you at all. It may just mean that you're not overly sad about your situation or something of that nature. But it's not driving you. But if you learn to embrace where you are. I'm in transition. I have an opportunity. I can go in any direction I want to go. There may be sacrifices I have to make. There may be things I need to learn. There may be improvements that I need to make to myself. But now you're driving yourself to get better. And you're driving yourself to be in a better situation. You're driving yourself to be better when you do get that next opportunity. And it just stuck with me the way they were describing that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. First of all, I'd like to apologize for missing last week and not getting an episode out. I was traveling and did not get a chance to publish an episode last week. So my apologies for that, but we are here this week. I do have some exciting guests coming up that I will be recording with very soon that will be coming out. But today's episode is just me, and I'm going to talk about a couple things that I have been listening to in other contexts. But as I got to thinking about what they were saying, realized that it does apply to the context of being a job seeker and being on the journey of finding your next opportunity when you are analyzing your past opportunity and your past job and your performance there and things like that. So recently, I have been listening to a lot of different things. One thing that you will find if you are around me for any period of time is that I love hearing and reading about the creative process in anything. I love hearing the creative process with bands and the music they make and how they make it and what headspace they were in when they made it. I love that in film. I used to love watching Inside the Actor's Studio, a TV show that used to be on where they would talk to the actors and they'd go over their process and different movies they were in and what they were thinking and their approach to that and the things like that. And in the music context, I played music when I was younger, and I love hearing about the process that they did for a particular record. For example, I love watching any music documentary, and it doesn't matter if I like the band or not. I love seeing the process of how they made the record. And a great example of that is I am not a huge fan or really a fan much at all of the band Metallica. I respect them. I think they are really good musicians. They made some really cool songs. Inner Sandman is a great song that is fun and exciting and things like that. But as a whole, I am not a Metallica fan. However, they came out with a documentary a while back that is one of my favorite documentaries to watch. And thus, I will watch actors talking to other actors, talking about their process, talking about their journey of becoming a household name as an actor, the struggles they went through, having to be a waiter, and all the different miscellaneous jobs they would do when they were struggling. I just find all of that fascinating. So if you're around me for any period of time, you will probably hear me talk about that in some form or fashion. Well, recently, I have been seeing that one of the TV shows that I actually liked when it was originally on, the show Scrubs, is coming back. They're rebooting it with a lot of the original cast. And thus, I start going down a rabbit hole sometimes of looking for information on things like that. Well, I was listening to a couple podcasts with the actor Zach Braff, which is one of the main actors in Scrubs. He is also the writer and director of the movie Garden State, which is highly regarded as a great independent film and has one of the best soundtracks that's ever been made. But I was listening to this podcast and he was talking to another actor, and they were talking about the idea of embracing or loving your fate. And that struck me. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit in the context of job seeking. To give you a little more color into what they were talking about, and I do think that it helps with the illustration of where I'm eventually going to go in this episode, is Zach was talking about a movie that he made with Robert De Niro. It was a comedy, and in his mind was some of his best work he had ever done. He was super excited about the movie. He couldn't wait for people to see it here in the States. And it was something he was very, very proud of. The problem is no one in the States has ever seen it. And the reason is because there was a lawsuit with the distribution company that would have distributed it throughout the United States. And because of that lawsuit, that movie has never been shown in the United States in any form or fashion. It hasn't been in theaters. It hasn't been on TV. It hasn't been on any streaming service. The only way that you would be able to see this movie is if you were in Europe or some other country and using one of their streaming services. You could watch it because it does get distributed over there, but because of the lawsuit, which he had nothing to do with, he has no control over, the movie never saw the light of day in the United States, which is obviously a bummer. But the illustration they were using was that you should learn to love your fate or embrace your fate, not just accept your fate. And I really enjoyed listening to that episode. And at first, I really didn't think very much into how this would translate to an episode or anything like that. But over the course of a couple of days, as it marinated in my mind, I started to really appreciate that analogy more and more in the context of your career. Because the reality is a lot of people, especially if you experience a mass layoff or a small layoff and you are suddenly terminated from a job and you have zero control sometimes over your fate with that company. You know, in the context of, say, an oil and gas company, a lot of times when the layoffs happen is due to oil price and the economic impact of the oil price dropping, thus the company's not being able to make the money they were making and they have to cut costs. Well, that has nothing to do with the employee. That has to do with factors that have nothing to do with even the company a lot of times. But the fate of the employee is impacted by things that they cannot control. And what they were really getting at was learning to embrace things that you cannot control. Because if you worry too much about the things that you can't control, you're going to be a nervous wreck. You're going to be just worrying all the time. And it's one thing to accept your fate and say, well, this happened, right? But if you've heard many episodes of this podcast, you've probably heard me talk a lot about reshaping things in your mind. And I feel like that's important on a lot of different factors. I've talked about taking ownership of your career and your past position in your job. And when you do get let go, instead of having the mindset of this company did this to me, and I'm now a victim of what this company did, taking a look objectively at how you could have contributed to the outcome that you were forced into. What I don't mean by that is I do not mean that you should look at it and say, well, it's my fault because. That's not what I'm getting at. So please don't hear that if that's what you just heard. What I'm saying is looking at a situation and objectively looking at, I could have provided more value here, but I didn't at that particular moment. And when you are able to look at your situation like that, you can now improve because you see things that maybe you could have improved for your next position. And now you're getting better in this time of transition. Maybe, and I'll just make something up, but well, you know what? No, I'll use myself as an example. Okay. I've mentioned on this podcast before, really early on when I was talking to Zach Copland, which is probably in the first 5 episodes. And I was talking to him and I asked him if he was someone who had a mentor. Now, the reason why I asked that question is because I realized in my last position that I had worked for coming up on 20 years after college, and I had never really had a mentor. Originally, when I would think of that, the way I would have described it is I never really had someone who took an interest in me to the point that they wanted to take me under their wing, show me what they know, and bring me along because they saw something in me. What I realized is that I myself had never asked anyone to be my mentor. And as I was talking to Zach, he made a very good point in that there's really not a lot of upside for a mentor to be a mentor. It's time and effort on their side. It is something that is outside of their job description or their everyday activity. And unless you work for that person, there is little upside for the mentor unless they are a person that takes a lot of pride and gets a lot of joy in teaching other people what they know. So there's not a lot of upside. And you're going to have to put skin in the game, so to speak, to have a mentor. It's going to require some price that you're going to have to pay to be a mentee. So, when I look in the context of this episode and I say, my fate is that I have never had a mentor. Well, now if I turn it around a little bit, I can look at it and say, look how far I've gotten in spite of not having a mentor. But I also learned what I need to do to get a mentor, because clearly it's something that I've wanted. I brought it up, but it's not something that I've taken the steps as of yet to get. And when you just accept things, a lot of people are about acceptance. They want to be accepted, which is great. But in a lot of areas in life, acceptance can simply mean tolerance. And it doesn't really drive you to improve or treat someone better or something like that. You just tolerate it. So if you just accept your fate, it may not drive you to get better. It may not drive you at all. It may just mean that you're not overly sad about your situation or something of that nature. But it's not driving you. But if you learn to embrace your fate, embrace where you are. I'm in transition. I have an opportunity. I can go in any direction I want to go. There may be sacrifices I have to make. There may be things I need to learn. There may be improvements that I need to make to myself. But now you're driving yourself to get better. And you're driving yourself to be in a better situation. You're driving yourself to be better when you do get that next opportunity. And it just stuck with me the way they were describing that. I'll give another example that I think illustrates this a little bit, and it doesn't have anything to do with the job search, but he was the first person that I thought of when I heard them talking about embracing or loving your fate. I have a very good friend named James. I've known him since, I don't know, junior high, maybe a little bit before then. I've known him for a long, long time. He's still one of my good friends. I've done a podcast with him. He's someone I talk to on a pretty regular basis, even now. And James has rheumatoid arthritis, pretty severe. Probably about as severe as I've heard. And if you know anything about rheumatoid, it is devastating. Your joints lock up. You have trouble moving. And quite frankly, you are in constant pain all the time. And I feel like James is the person who embraces his fate. And why do I say that? Because James is a person who I have watched adapt to every situation he has been thrown into. When I describe him, let me just describe where he's at. Both of his wrists are fused together. He cannot bend his wrists. He has one elbow that's fused in a cocked position, so he can't straighten his arm. He's had to have shoulder replaced. He has to take monthly shots to try to slow it down so that he is able to walk normally. Just recently, he ruptured a tendon in his thumb simply because of calcium buildup in his thumb joint that ruptured his tendon. And now he can't use his thumb normally. He can't raise his thumb. He can't give something like, if you imagine giving a thumbs up to somebody, he can't do that because he ruptured that tendon. And because of rheumatoid, and the risks of the surgery that he would have to fix it, he's most likely not going to be able to fix it. But James adapts and does the most amazing things I have seen anyone do, regardless of if they have rheumatoid or not. He just keeps going. He finds a new way to do it. He's one of the most creative people I've ever met. He can create scenery out of styrofoam, out of wood, out of anything you can think of that looks real. He makes sets for plays. He creates Dungeons and Dragons scenery that looks like it is a picture. He makes cotton candy for people. He does a lot of amazing things, and he is the most helpful person, the most generous person to a lot of people that most people overlook. James has a heart for those people. He's embraced his fate. He's not a victim to it. He's not just accepted it. He's embraced it. He continues to push even when fate showed him a pretty bad hand. I admire him for that. And every time I think of him, I'm inspired. Just simply because he keeps pushing forward. And he doesn't wallow in the bad hand that he was presented at a pretty young age when he was in college. It was the first time he found out. And I admire that so much. When you get let go from a company, a lot of times it's just not in your control. It's just not. You're not privy to the decisions that are being made. A lot of times you may never know the real reason why they did it. And in the case, a lot of times it's purely financial. It can be situational. It can be environmental. It can be market driven. It can be a lot of different things that has nothing to do with you. And so in a lot of ways, it's just your fate for that particular moment. But you can embrace the fact that you're in a new situation, a new season. You have a chance to do something new. You have a chance to improve. You have a chance to be a better employee. You have a chance to learn how to grow, if you want to see it that way. And if you can't tell, I'm big on that. And I'm not naive. These situations are really hard. I just went through it for a full year. I understand it's difficult. The things you have to go through when you are looking for a new job is difficult. The rejection, the ghosting, constant applying, hearing no. Some people treating you differently because you don't have a job. It happens. I've been there. But you're not stuck. You're just not. I have said this many times, and I'll continue to say it because I believe it in the depths of my being. 3 things. First thing is, if you are going through a job search and you're in transition right now, first thing to know, you're not alone. There are a lot of people that are going through a job search at all times. I looked at statistics when I first started this podcast because I was curious. how many people since 2020 have been unemployed at any given month up until I believe it was December of 2024 was when I looked this up. And since 2020, which we all know what happened in 2020 with COVID, on average, there has been 4.5 to 5 million people unemployed. And that number is actually low because that number is based solely on the people who are drawing unemployment. So for the people who have exhausted unemployment benefits or didn't apply for unemployment benefits or maybe just didn't get them based on circumstance, it didn't count them. So most likely it's more than that. And you're not alone. And if you were a part of a mass layoff, you know you're not alone because hundreds of people got laid off at the same time. You're not alone. And you're not the only one. The second thing, and this one I really want to hammer home. You are not a failure. Even if you did something wrong and you got fired, you broke a rule. I'm not going to act like it was super egregious, but even if it was, maybe you broke a policy accidentally, not realizing that you were breaking that policy, but it was something that the company couldn't look past, and so they fired you. You may have failed at that job, but you're not a failure. You made a mistake, or you were just laid off and it had nothing to do with you. You're not a failure. And just because some people got to stay and you didn't, doesn't make you a failure. And just because you've been looking for a job for 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years, doesn't make you a failure. Some markets are extremely saturated right now. I know the tech market is extremely saturated with people looking for work. The project management sector is extremely saturated right now. There are a ton of people looking for project management jobs. Technical recruiters are extremely saturated right now. HR professionals, extremely saturated right now. The market corrected after 2020. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are all in the same boat. So just because it's taking a while doesn't mean you're a failure. Just because you got to the final round in an interview process at a company that you really wanted to work at and they picked someone else doesn't make you a failure. Just because you had a bad interview and just didn't present yourself the way you wanted to, I hate that for you. I really do. I wish everyone would present themselves exactly how they wanted to, answer every question exactly how they wanted to, weren't super nervous and not really being themselves. I wish that never happened. But even if it did, you're not a failure. And I just want to drive that home. You are not a failure. And the third thing is pretty simple. And it's based somewhat on the other two. You're going to find another job. There's another job out there for you. You're going to find it. It may be taking longer than you want, but you're going to find it. And because of the experience that you're going through now, the things you're learning about yourself, the things you're improving about yourself, going through the hardships of being rejected a lot, all of those things. You're not only going to find that next opportunity, you're going to thrive at that next opportunity because you're growing and you're developing a mindset that's going to make you thrive at that next position. So I want to drive that home. But that's what I've been thinking about. And those are some of the things I've been listening to. I've been listening to a lot of things about mindset and approach and how you approach every situation, not just a job. And that phrase of embracing and or loving your fate has just stuck in my mind. And I wanted to talk about it. So, as I say every episode, if this is your first time hitting that play button, it's an honor for you to do so. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for being willing to give this podcast a chance. If you've listened to most of these episodes, I'll never be able to thank you enough. So thank you for continuing to listen to this podcast. As always, I do ask if you know someone who is going through a job search and needs a little bit of encouragement, needs some information on how they might be able to improve their search techniques, interview techniques, resume, LinkedIn, those kind of things. I ask you to forward this podcast to them. Maybe you know of an episode. I know the episode that I did with Erin Luber on interviewing resonated with a lot of people. She was fantastic and really gave a lot of great insight into interviewing when you get in front of that next opportunity and that hopefully your next company. Most of these episodes are with guests. It's not normally just me. And a lot of those bring some amazing information about the journey that you're on of being on a job search. So I do ask that you forward to someone who you know who may need this information. But that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seekers Journey podcast. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on what I heard. And we'll see you soon with some new guests. Bye-bye.